and welcome everyone to our session today. Super excited to be talking to you about Excel because I got to tell you, this is an application that we usually end up knowing a few things on how to do some data entry, how to create some basic formulas. But today, based on the title, of course, we will be going way beyond those basics, starting with a feature that I use on a daily basis, which is called named ranges. Right on the first page of your handout, you'll find the information about named ranges. So when it comes to using Excel, there are definitely some shortcuts and some different things that we should be aware of when it comes to creating formulas and copying formulas and doing different things. And named ranges have a lot of benefits. They can assist us with creating formulas that we want to copy. And instead of having to use an absolute reference and locking down a cell with dollar signs, we could name the cell and then use it in the formula. It makes creating formulas easier to understand when we have named ranges. Another benefit with naming ranges is if you're going to create a lot of formulas on the same range of data, it's just easier to do it if you name the cells. We'll see some examples of each of those, as well as being able to use the named range across multiple sheets. We also can use it to navigate. I mean, I could go on and on just about the benefits of named ranges. But before I show you how to create them, there are some guidelines in your handout about how you name them or what you can and can't do when you name them. The first character of the name has to start with a letter. It can have an underscore or a backslash. The rest of the characters can be letters, numbers, periods, and underscores. But the big thing is you cannot use a space in the name. Also, you can't name it the same as a cell reference, like QTR for quarter one. That's actually a cell. So if you think about the fact that we have over 16,000 columns going across and 1,048,576 rows going down, be careful if you're abbreviating the name. It's great to abbreviate, but you don't want to abbreviate so much that you don't know what the named range is. Now, we're going to do a couple of examples, like I said, and I'll show you a couple of different ways to actually create named ranges and then how to use them as well. So first one that I'm going to do is on this references worksheet, I'm going to go to cell G1. I'm sorry, G2. I'm going to start on G2. On cell G2, I want to name the cell and I want to name it commission rate because that's what it is. This 4% is the commission rate for all the salespeople. And I want to be able to use it in a formula and be able to copy the formula down and always refer to G2. You may be familiar with doing an absolute reference where you could lock a cell down by using dollar signs. That can be confusing to some people. If they see that, they don't understand what the dollar signs do. Naming it is a better option. So what I'm going to do is click G2 on this worksheet. And at the top left, underneath the ribbon, I'm going to click in the name box where it currently says G2. I'm going to type the name that I want. I'm going to use uppercase, lowercase. So I'm going to type in commission rate, but no spaces in the name. I'm going to press my enter key. And now that cell is no longer referred to as G2. It's now being referenced as commission rate. Now, just so you could see, if I make this named range, this name box, I should say, bigger, I just kind of slid the window over. You can see the full name on my screen. Now, how do I use that in a formula? You actually have a couple of different ways that you can do it. I'm going to go to G5 and use it in a formula, and I will show you two different ways to use it in a formula because it depends on what you're doing, what might be easier for you. And it depends on where the named range is. Because if the named range is in a different worksheet, there's one way that might be a little bit easier and better. So First example is I'm going to do equal. I want to take their total sales, so in this case it's going to be F5, and multiply it by the commission rate. If I start typing COM, it shows me all of the functions that begin with those letters. Functions have a circle with an FX on the left-hand side, but notice the named range that I just created called commission rate is listed, but the icon on the left-hand side is the squares with the blue. I'm going to double-click commission rate. It automatically highlights cell G2. I'm going to do Control-Enter, and it completes that formula, showing in the formula bar them taking F5 multiplied by commission rate. So it's actually easier to understand by doing it that way. But G2 is the named range for commission rate is on the same worksheet as where I'm doing the formula. So a second option for using it in a formula is I'm going to go to G6. I'm going to do equal F6, I'm going to do asterisk, and I'm going to click G2. When I click the cell, it automatically adds the named range also. Then I'm going to Control Enter. I get the correct answer, noticing in the formula bar that it says commission rate. So I can copy this formula down for the other employees, and each one of them will have commission rate as what it's multiplying by. Now, of course, if I go to G2, and let's say that we had an increase that's going to be 4.5%, rounds it to 5 based on my formatting right now, but that's okay. It will automatically adjust the formula. And even if I were using that named range in a different worksheet, and I changed it here, it would update it in any other sheet. Now that's pretty cool that I can go to a different sheet and use that commission rate. So let's say that I go to the sales worksheet and I happen to go to cell H1 and I want to create a formula using that commission rate. I'm just going to do a basic formula. I'm going to do equal 3,500 multiplied by commission rate. So it doesn't have to be used within the same sheet. It can be used from anywhere you are. It's pretty cool that way. So just so you could see, I use commission. Oops, sorry. I forgot to double click on it. Sorry about that. That was totally my fault. I'm going to double click commission rate. I'm going to press enter. It automatically did the calculation using that commission rate coming from that other sheet. What a great option. I have a lot of times, because I reference mileage, I reference commission, I do reference commission rate type things. I reference a lot of things from one sheet. It's kind of like my cheat sheet. And then I use formulas all over the rest of the workbook referencing those named ranges. So pretty cool to do that. Now let me give you another example of how you can actually utilize the named ranges. I'm going to go back to the worksheet called references again. And from here, what I want to do is create a named range for G1. I want G1 to be called sales goal. I could do this by going to the formulas tab of the ribbon. Just to point this out before I use it, on the formulas tab of the ribbon, we have this defined names group. This is a group of commands related to naming and using named ranges. So what I'm going to do is select F1 and G1. I want to use the text in cell F1 to name the cell for G1. I'm going to click Create from Selection on the ribbon. It automatically knows that there's text in the left column. It's going to use that value for the name of the cell. All I have to do is click OK. Now, how do I know what it did? How do I know that that worked? Well, if I go back to the name box at the top left, there's a down arrow. If you click that down arrow, you will see a list of your named ranges. If I click sales and it put an underscore for the space that was on F1, if I click it, it automatically takes me to that cell. So let's say that I'm over on the worksheet called Employee Departments, and I need to go back to the commission rate. I could go to the name box, click on the drop down, click commission rate. It automatically navigates me back to the worksheet, to the cell that I had named commission rate. So I can use it to navigate. Also, just so that you know, if you do a link, you do Control K and add a link on a cell, you can use a named range as a link. Now, we're going to get into a couple more examples of using named ranges and how to build them. But as we do this, I want to bring in a couple of additional functions. I'm going to use that sales goal in a formula. On the bottom of page 1, going to page 2 in your handout, it talks about the if function. The if function is a very common function to use in Excel, that it is a true or a false type scenario. So what this means is I can use an if function to ask the computer to look at a logical test. And if that logical test is true, do this. But if whatever the logical test is false, do something else. The example I'm going to do on H5 is I want to know if each salesperson, if their total sales in column F is equal to the sales goal. If it is, I want it to say yes. If it's false, I want it to say no, because I'm asking the question, sales goal met, and I want a yes or a no answer. Now I'm going to start with an equal. I'm going to do the letter I. I'm going to press my tab key because it is on the if function. You will notice that it brings up, of course, a screen tip looking for the arguments we need to put in. First argument is the logical test. Now, if I'm not quite sure what I'm supposed to really do, just so you know, I can click the FX from the Formulas tab of the ribbon or in the Formula Icons group. When I click FX, because I had started the formula with my equal if, it automatically takes me into what is called the function arguments window, where I call this the helper window because it helps us to build formulas by breaking down each of the arguments into different rows. So right now my cursor is on the logical test. And what I want to do is look at cell F5 to see if it is greater than or equal to G1. And you can see I just clicked on the cells because they're right there on my sheet. So F5, if it's greater than or equal to the sales goal. When I clicked, of course, G1, it put the named range there. So on the right-hand side, I can see that the answer is already true. I'm going to click in the box for value if true, and I'm going to type yes. I'm going to click in the value if false, and I'm going to put in no. The computer will put a comma to separate each argument, and because I'm using text for the yes and the no, the computer's going to automatically put quotes around the text. I'm going to click OK. The first person is a yes, because if we look at their total sales, it is greater than or equal to the sales goal. Because I have G1 as a named range, I can copy this formula down so that each one of the formulas will have sales goal. The first person is the only one that met their sales goal as of right now. But what if I audit the records? And let's say that for William Nelson for quarter one, he really had 2,400 for quarter one. As soon as that value changes, it automatically changes the sales goal met to be an answer of yes. So great ways to be creating a formula to be able to say, analyze this, and if it's true, do one thing. If it's false, do another. And whatever you want for the true and the false, it could even be a formula. It could be left blank. There's a lot of different options for the answer that you want to get back out of it. Now, we also have a lot of other types of if functions. There's a sum if. Sum if will add together a range of cells if it matches the criteria. I'll do an example of that one. So just so you could see, let's go to, I'm trying to think of what a good, well, actually the employee department. I'm going to go to the worksheet employee departments, and on cell G2 under the sum if, I want to create a formula that adds together all of the salaries if their department in column C is marketing, as an example. I want to get a total of all the salaries if the employee is in the marketing department. Now, before I create that, I'm going to do some named ranges because I don't want to have to select the range of cells every time I do a formula. So what I'm going to do is select B5 through I52 is the last row of this data. So I'm selecting a range of cells that includes the headings going across the top, because I want to use the headings in the top row to name each column of data. I'm going to do that by going back to the Formulas tab of the ribbon. I'm going to click that Create from Selection again, and it's looking at noticing that we have a top row and a left column. I don't want the left column to be used. I'm going to uncheck that. I just wanted to use the top row, which is row 5, to name the ranges of the cells underneath it. All I have to do is click OK, and it automatically did that. Now, how do I know what it did? Go to the name box, click on the drop down. I have a lot of them created now. If I click department, it selects all the cells underneath that header department. So each one of those columns are now a named range. So I'm going to use them in my formula. I'm going to go to G2. I'm going to create a sum if by doing equal SU. Then I'm going to double click sum if. So what you're seeing for the criteria, or I should say for the arguments, is first it wants to know what is the range you want me to evaluate. Then what is the criteria, and then what is the range of cells you want me to add together. So first I want it to use the department. So I'm going to type DE. I'm going to double click department. So I want it to look at the department, comma, the criteria is going to be marketing. I have to put that in quotes because I'm typing it myself. The computer isn't going to do those quotes for me. So I'm putting in quotes, marketing quote, comma, to go to the last argument. And it wants to know what is the range I want to add together if the criteria matches being marketing. I'm going to do salary. I'm going to type an S. I'm going to double click or press tab on salary. It automatically selects all that. I'm going to control enter, and I automatically have added together all of the salaries for everyone in the marketing department. It does that. And it was super easy. And when I look at that formula in the formula bar, it's easy to understand it. I can see that it's going to sum if the department is marketing, it's going to add together the salaries. So it makes it so much easier to understand the formulas by using those named ranges. Plus, I didn't have to go and select the range of cells because I'm going to use them in 2 additional formulas. I'm going to do what is called a COUNTIF. I want to put the answer on cell H2. And what I want to do is I want to have the computer count how many people are in marketing. So how many people are making up that sum of that salary for the department called marketing? So what I want to do is use a function called COUNTIF. I'm going to start with equal COU so that it narrows my list down. I'm going to double click on the COUNTIF function, and all it wants to know is what is the range of cells you want me to evaluate and what's the criteria. I want it to use the department, so I'm going to put in DE. I'm going to double click the name department. I'm going to put in a comma to separate my arguments. Oops. It thought I wanted to press enter. Sorry about that. That was me. I'm going to put in a comma, and my criteria is going to be marketing. So I'm going to do quote, marketing, quote. And by the way, even though in that department column, marketing is a capital M, I don't have to put it in my criteria as a capitalized M, just so you know. I'm going to control enter. There's only 4 people in the in the marketing department making up that total salary. Just so you know how the count if works. Pretty awesome. I use that count if a lot, by the way. If I want to count how many orders have shipped based on a date range or whatever, lots of different ways that we can be using each of these. Now, the last if I'm going to do on this worksheet is an average if. I'm going to go to cell I2, and I want to get the average salary of employees in the marketing department. So what's the average salary of everybody in marketing? I'm going to do equal AV. I'm going to double click on average if. I'm going to double click on average if. The range I wanted to evaluate is department, comma, the criteria is marketing, once again in quotes, comma, the range that I want to get the average of is the salary. I'm going to control enter after I put that in, and now I can see the average for the employees in the marketing department is 38,375. And of course, being a formula, if anything changes, the formulas will automatically update. But the nice thing about doing this with the named ranges is, yes, it's easier to read the formula in the formula bar, but also it was easier to create instead of having to go back and select the range of cells. Because what if we had 6,000 employees or 12,000 employees or 100,000 employees? Having to go back and keep reselecting the ranges over and over again, that is a cause for disaster in my books. I would much rather have it as a named range instead. So there's a lot of different types of if functions, and I gave you some examples in your handout, different than the ones that I'm displaying here today, just so you have a few additional options that you can be looking at. And then also, I want to talk about a feature called a flash fill. In case you're not familiar with this feature, I'm going to go to the worksheet called Dates. And what I want to do is, this is a list of employees, and we have some information already entered. We have their last name, first name, the date that they were hired with the company, the department that they're currently in, and then we have their office location. In column H for their office location, it's including multiple pieces of data about the employee. The first part is the building they're in, whether it's lab, central, HQ, whatever. That's the building they're in. Then it has a 2-digit code. Then it has the last 4 numbers are their phone extension. What we want to do is populate their phone extension from column H into column I. We want to populate the name of their building to appear in column J. I'm going to start on cell I4, and I'm going to be using a feature called the flash fill. It follows a pattern that we give it. So I need to give it the first number for the extension in column H. The first person, Erica Decker, if I look at cell H4, her extension is 2099. I'm going to type that on I4. Then I'm going to do Control Enter to stay on that cell. I'm going to go to the Data tab of the ribbon. And from there, in the Data Tools group on the right-hand side, I'm going to click on the icon called Flash Fill. It's going to look at the data in the cell that I'm actively clicked on, and it's going to look to the left and to the right for the pattern and follow the pattern. So it automatically copies the last four numbers out of column H and places it in column I. Matthew, did someone have a question?
Yeah, I was so focused on the presentation here that I actually missed one in the Q&A. It was on the last sheet. They're wondering if they can use a count if for multiple categories. So can they use a count if function to determine how many people are in sales, how many are in marketing, and how many are executive?
Yes, as a matter of fact, and that's a great question. There's a count if S. Count if S or average if S, sum if S, any of the S functions, that means multiple criteria. So use a count if S, then you can enter in the number of criterias you need. So if you want executives, you want sales and marketing, you could do all three. Good question.
Yes. I think they're actually asking though if there's a function to count how many sales, how many people are in sales, and just count, just the count function. Yeah.
Yes. So yes, the count if S can count how many people are in whatever departments they enter as their criteria.
Okay.
So it can be, it can count how many people are in sales and marketing, how many people are executives and personnel, etc.
Okay, great. Perfect. Okay, sweet. Thank you.
Each of those will work the same. You could do it with multiple criteria or one.
Perfect.
That was a great question. Thank that person for me, if you would, please. So back to our dates worksheet. The next example I want to do to show you this flash fill feature is in column J. I'm going to go to cell J4, and Erica Decker has lab as their office location. So I'm going to put in the first pattern. I'm going to put in the word lab. I'm going to control enter. From the data tab of the ribbon, I'm going to click flash fill again, and it's going to automatically follow my pattern and automatically fill in the name of the building coming from column H. So it's going to be Lab Central HQ. The computer is very smart on being able to do things like this. Now, there is alternatives to doing the flash fill. We could use text-related functions to do this as well. But this is super easy to do because the computer just follows what we tell it to do. But I'm going to do one more example and show you a different way besides clicking on the flash fill icon of how you can use this feature. I'm going to go to cell A4. And what I want to do is combine together the contents of two different cells. I want to put the full name of the employee instead of having last name as a separate column, first name as a separate column. Instead, I want to combine them together. I still want to keep last and first separated, but I also want them together. So I want it to be last name space first name. And I want to change the casing. Right now, it's all uppercase. I want to do title case, which capitalizes the first letter of both names. I'm going to type it in how I want it to look. I'm going to type in Erica space Decker. I have to make sure that I spell it correctly, matching how they have it spelled. I'm going to press enter to move down one cell instead of control enter and staying on the cell, because once I have the first one, it will follow my pattern by clicking, I should say, entering the first letter of the first name of the next person. So the next person is Angela Berry. If I type the letter A, it automatically recognizes that I want it to follow a pattern. All I have to do is press my enter key, and it will automatically follow to take each of the first and the last names and combine them together, and follows the casing that I had used for the proper casing. So pretty exciting that it can do things like that. So if you haven't used this feature called Flash Fill, give it a try. It can combine information together. It can pull information out, all depending on the patterns that you give it. So pretty awesome. But we're going to kind of jump back a little bit to some additional formulas, I want to do lookup functions with you. And I'm going to go back to this employee departments worksheet where we had all of those employees. And what I want to do is in rows 1 and 2, there's an employee ID that has been entered. Then there's a placeholder for last name, first name, and department. I want to be able to enter an employee ID number and have it automatically populate their last name, their first name, and their department coming from this range of data. One way to do this is using a feature called a VLOOKUP. V stands for vertical, and what it's going to do is have us put in what is the range of cells that you want me to analyze. Then we have to tell it which of the, excuse me, I got tickle, which is the lookup value, what is the value that we want it to look up, and what column do we want to get the answer from. Let me walk you through this. I'm going to be on C2, and I want to locate the last name based on the employee ID number I have entered. I'm going to do equal the letter V, the letter V. I'm going to double click VLOOKUP. Oops, sorry. I clicked my mouse on the wrong cell. My mouse is moving so fast on me. Sorry about that. I got a new mouse, new computer, and I haven't slowed my mouse down yet. I should have done that before we got started. Sorry. So anyway, I'm going to go back and I'm going to do equal V. Lost my mouse again. Sorry. Let me get back to my sheet. Sorry, that is totally my mouse being weird. So I'm going to double click VLOOKUP. And when you look at the arguments, it wants to first know what is the lookup value. Well, what I wanted to find is going to be the number on B2. I can either type B2 or I can click on cell B2, whichever works best for you. So then all it wants is a comma to separate the arguments. Then it wants to know what is the range of cells that the data is going to be within. They call it a table array. In this particular worksheet and this range of data, that's going to be the employee ID number needs to be the first column of data, but I need to select all the way over to the last column of the data I want it to look in. Then I'm going to need to put in what is called a column index number. So based on this table array, the range of cells that I enter, I have to count the number of columns across that is going to get me to the column that is going to give the answer for that last name. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to put in my table array, which is going to be, oh, sorry, there goes my mouse again, is going to be B6. Got to move my mouse and select this entire range of data, B6 through I52. That's my range of data that I wanted to look at, comma, the column index number. What that is referring to is it wants to know which column going across is the column that we want the answer to come from. That is going to be, so I start on employee ID, that's column 1. Then it's department, data hired, degree, salary, last name. Last name is the 6th column across. Then I can do Control Enter, and it will automatically find the last name for the person based on that employee ID number. Now, if the employee ID number changes, like if I go to cell B2, I do have a drop-down arrow for this, but if I choose a different employee ID number, it automatically updates the last name. I could do that same thing to find the first name. If I go to D2, I can do equal VLOOKUP. My lookup value will once again be employee ID, comma. My range of cells is going to be B6 all the way across to I52 is the range I wanted to look in, comma. The column index number to find the first name is employee ID, department, data hire, degree, salary, last name, first name. 7th column across. If I do Control Enter, it automatically finds the first name to match up with that employee ID. So this is one way to look up data. But to be honest with you, I don't do that anymore. VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP and other lookups like match, index, etc. have been around for a very long time. But what if I want to create a lookup that is going to give me all of this information, and I'm just going to bring that over here and paste it, and I want it to look up the employee ID number, so I should have brought that column over too. I want to have the employee ID number be the lookup value, and let me make these columns a little bit wider here. What I want it to do is I want it to look up an employee ID number, but I'm going to do this a little bit differently than I did the first time. I'm going to use what is called an XLOOKUP. I'm going to copy and paste an employee ID just to make this a little bit easier. So here's an employee ID I want it to look up. And what I want it to do is to provide me all of the details, not just one column at a time. I want it to give me the department, the data hire, the degree, the salary, everything going all the way across, and populate it by doing the formula once and populate it underneath each of these headings. I'm going to start on cell L2. I'm going to do equal the letter X. I'm going to double click XLOOKUP. Just like the VLOOKUP, it needs to know what is the lookup value. I'm going to click K2. Comma, it wants to know what is the lookup array. Well, the lookup array is actually the employee ID number. So if I type an E, I have it as a named range. I'm going to double click employee ID, comma, what is the range that I want it to return? If I only wanted department, I could put that named range for department. I don't have to count the columns or anything like that. But I want all of the data. So I'm going to select C6 through I-52. C6 through I-52. I'm going to Control Enter, and it has automatically populated the answers going all the way across. Now that employee that I picked didn't have a degree, and the data hire needs to be formatted, but it gave us the answer that we were looking for. So if I format that data, it will come in correctly. But the thing about this is, there's more to this XLOOKUP. I gave you more information in your handout. We don't have enough time to cover all of it today, but there's some great examples of the XLOOKUP, starting on page 6 and going to page 7 of your handout. This is a newer function in Excel. If you have not used it yet, it has more arguments than I demonstrated today. It's a fantastic function. It allows you to do both a VLOOKUP and an HLOOKUP. So we could go down rows or across columns. So I don't use V or HLOOKUP anymore. I exclusively use the XLOOKUP. And it has other arguments that I don't need to do as a separate function as well. But just so you could get a brief introduction to how that works, this is pretty cool. With an VLOOKUP, I had to do a separate formula for each answer. But with the XLOOKUP, it could do them all at one single time based on the order that they appeared in. So pretty cool. Definitely practice. Check that out. Now also, if we go to page 7 and page 8, in your handout, it talks about sorting your data. Well, when it comes to sorting your data, you could simply go to the column you want to sort by. Like if I go to the date of hire column, if I'm just clicked on a cell within that column, I could go to the data tab of the ribbon. In the sort and filter group, I want to do Z to A. It automatically sorts that entire range of data. Notice that a couple of my formulas no longer work. I got a couple of NAs on that. But anyway, just so you could see, if I sort, it automatically can be done just by going to a column. But if you're going to be doing a lot of sorting and you want to be able to filter the data within your range, you may want to do a table for that range of data instead. By clicking on a cell within a range, you can go to the Insert tab of the ribbon, click the icon for Table. It selects your range of cells. All you have to do is click OK in that Create Table. The reason I do this very often, most often, is because it gives us formatting on that range of data. And in row 5, which is the header row at the top, it gives us the drop-down arrow, allowing us to have sorting and filtering capabilities. Of course, filtering is a way that we can see individual details based on a criteria. If I go to department as an example and I only want to see everybody in marketing, I can filter based on marketing. If I go back to the drop down, I can clear the filter and bring back all the records. Okay. So I was doing a formula earlier that I wanted to know the sum, the count, the average if, those kind of things, that sum if they were in marketing. Well, what if I wanted to know the sum of each individual department? I could actually do that in a pivot table. So a pivot table would probably be a smarter option than having separate formulas using that sum if and doing it for each department individually. A pivot table can analyze a range of data and be able to do different types of calculations with that data. If you are clicked on any cell within a range, you can go to the Insert tab of the ribbon. On the left-hand side, click the icon for Pivot Table. I'm just going to keep the data that's on here and say I want to leave it on a new sheet and click OK. Now, if I wanted this pivot table to be on the sheet that I was in and click the cell I wanted to go to, I could have done that, but I wanted to do this as its own sheet. What it's going to do is give you a field list on the right-hand side. That is where you go to actually create the pivot table. You can click the square in front of the names of the fields that you want to add to the pivot table. So if I want department, I click department. In column A of my cells, it adds a unique list of all departments. If I want the salary, on the right-hand side in the field list, I click salary. It automatically gives me a salary for each one of the individual departments based on all of the employees. But what if I want to get an average of the salaries based on each department? I could technically add the salary field twice. Because what it's doing on this right-hand side is when you select a field, like I clicked in front of department, it automatically gave me the department field down in this rows box. We have 4 squares down at the bottom. We have filters, columns, rows, and values. In the values column is where it put a sum of the salary. So anytime you choose a number field, it assumes you want to get a sum of whatever the values are. I want to add salary twice. What I'm going to do is grab the salary from the list on the right-hand side, drag it down to the values box at the bottom right, and drop it. It adds the same column twice. So now I have a column B and a column C in the spreadsheet of the same data. How do I get that to be an average versus a sum? We can change the calculation that it's using. So if I go to column C and right-click on any of the numbers for each of the departments, like if I right-click on C4, from the pop-up menu, I can go to this feature here called Summarize Values By. You can see that it's clicked on sum. It does that by default because that's the most common. But if I want to get an average instead, I can choose average. And of course, I can go to cell C3, get rid of that 2 because it has to have a unique name. So it automatically is going to give you the average of all of those departments. The nice thing about this also is this data is linked back to the original worksheet. Now, of course, if I wanted this pivot table to actually be in a different sheet, I want it to be back in that employee departments sheet. I could actually move this by selecting the cells of the pivot table itself. I could either copy it or cut it. I'm going to cut it. I'm going to control X. I'm going to go back to that employee department. I'm going to say that I want it to appear on cell K5. I'm going to go to cell K5 and paste this. I automatically have that pivot table. When you are clicked on a cell inside that pivot table, you get the field list on the right-hand side. And if you look at the ribbon, you now have tabs for managing the pivot table. You have a pivot table analyze tab, you have a design tab, etc. Well, what if I wanted to create a chart that is based on this pivot table data? I can go to the pivot table analyze tab of the ribbon. On the right-hand side in the tools group, I can click the icon pivot chart. I can choose the chart type that I want to use. I'm going to choose pie. I'm going to click OK, and it will automatically insert a chart in the middle of your worksheet. You can click and drag and move it wherever you want it to be placed. And when you look at the chart, you have chart tools on the ribbon that you can use. There is a design tab that I would go to change the formatting. And it can also add percentages or other labels because it's a pie chart, it uses percentages. So if I want to use this format, I can go to this chart styles, click on this one, and it automatically updates the chart to match. So now I can see there is 55% of the salaries are all coming from the sales department. Only 6% are coming from personnel. Now, of course, all this data is connected back to that range of data. We can just see it and analyze it all within one sheet if we want to. So pivot tables are a great way to be able to drill in and only see specific information. I want to do this one more time. So this was a pivot table and a pivot chart. I'm going to go to the worksheet called Company Orders. This is a list of thousands of rows of orders that companies have placed for our products that we sell. What I want to do is create a pivot table that's going to show me who the salesperson was and what their total sales was. I'm going to create a pivot table by going to the Insert tab. I'm going to click Pivot Table. I'm going to leave the defaults. I'm going to click OK. I now have a new sheet that I can create my pivot table on. On the right-hand side of the screen, I'm first going to click Salesperson. In column A of the spreadsheet, I get a unique list of all salespeople, but I also want to know the total extended price of all the orders they sold. So on the right-hand side, I'm going to click the box in front of extended price. I automatically get the sum of extended price. But I also need to know who is the company they sold to. So I'm going to click Company Name. What that does is it adds the name of the company indented underneath the salesperson. So every company that the Andrew Fuller sold, and in column B is the subtotal of how much they sold to that company. So as I scroll down, I can see the next salesperson is Ann Dodsworth. It's showing all the companies that she sold product to. And then in column B, of course, it's including the sum for all the orders for those specific companies from Ann Dodsworth. If I go back to that company orders worksheet, could you do that in this worksheet? Not like I just did. I did that in just a couple of seconds. I couldn't do that here in this spreadsheet. So for me, pivot tables are an essential tool to be using within Excel. Let me go back to that sheet again where I had this pivot table. And let's say that I also need to know what the country is. On the right-hand side, I'm going to click Country. I could display the country, but it looks kind of weird this way. Is this the way I really want it to look? Probably not. what if I just want to filter by country? Or I want to be able to filter by salesperson. Or what if I want to filter by date? The nice thing about a pivot table is we have great ways to do that. I'm going to actually go back to the right-hand side and uncheck country. Now, by the way, what if I wanted country, but I didn't want company name? Whatever I click on the right, it instantly changes the pivot table, just like that. Can't do that in a regular spreadsheet. But I am going to put back the company name and I'm going to take off the country. And I'm going to actually go to the pivot table analyze tab of the ribbon. In the, excuse me, in the filter group, I want to filter by country and salesperson. I'm going to insert a slicer. I'm going to click this icon, insert slicer. I'm going to choose country and salesperson. I'm going to click OK. I have two separate little boxes for each of those options. I'm going to go to country just so you know. I'm going to go to the slicer tab of the ribbon. I'm going to change the color of the slicer and I'm going to change the height to be smaller and I'm going to do 3 columns. Just so you know, you could do this so that you can see things a little bit better. Much easier to use these filters. Now, how do we use these slicers to filter our data? Well, one way that you could do that is simply by going to the slicer that you want to see the records of. Let's say that I only want to see Canada. I could go to the country, click Canada, and it filters the pivot table to only show companies' orders that were in Canada. It updated, of course, the sum of the extended price. Now, if I want to also see USA orders with Canada, I could go to the slicer for country, click this icon at the top right for multiple select. Now I can choose more than one country. If I click USA, it adds USA and Canada to the filter. If I go to the top right of the country and click this clear filter, it will bring all of the records back. If I just want a certain salesperson, I can click on the name from that slicer and see just a specific salesperson. Once again, I can clear the filter. But let me give you one more filter option. I'm going to go back to the pivot table. I'm going to go back to the pivot table analyze tab of the ribbon. In the filter group, I'm going to choose insert timeline. It only looks at date fields. I'm going to choose order date, click OK. I now have this timeline that I can filter the records in the pivot table by date. What if I only want first quarter of 2024 orders? I can go to the right-hand side where it says months, change this to quarters. It changes the blue bar. I can click whichever quarter I want to see the records for. Every time I click, I could even go back and say, okay, I only want quarter 2 for Canada. Here's all the orders for quarter 2 for Canada. So we have the ability of being able to use lots of different features within a pivot table. If you haven't used those before, highly recommend them. You can't go wrong. It does things that we just simply cannot do in a regular columns and rows spreadsheet. Okay. Lots of cool things we talked about today with Excel. Use your handout to kind of refer back to some things. I skipped over a couple of things based on our time today. Use the practice file that was also put in the chat, which is the one I've been using today. Use that to practice so that you could go back and kind of redo the things that I was doing to get yourself up to speed or learn how to do additional features.